Most cruise lines require online check-in, and that check-in can open anywhere from 30 to 60 days prior to your sailing date. When you book your cruise, make a note of the online check-in date and mark it on your calendar. Why? Because if you're one of the first to log in and check in online as soon as it opens, you'll have first dibs on your preferred cruise boarding time. That is assuming you're cruising on a line that requires a boarding window. Again, not Princess, they're open boarding. As those slots fill up, only the less desirable ones are typically left available for those who delay in completing their online check-in process. The cruise check-in process online typically involves passengers logging into the cruise line's website and providing necessary personal information, things like travel documents, emergency contacts, and preferences. This also often includes selecting a boarding time. After completing the online check-in, passengers then receive boarding passes and instructions for embarkation day, which makes for smooth embarkation once they get to the port. Oh, and pro tip, sometimes cruisers delay that online check-in because they just don't feel like dealing with the documentation requirements, like going and fetching their passport and entering that information. But you don't have to complete everything all at one time, usually. My advice is put that online check-in date on your calendar, log on as soon as you can that day that it opens, make your preferences, especially with your preferred boarding time, save your check-in progress, and you can go back in later and deal with all of the annoying documentation stuff. But that way you can snag your preferred boarding time before someone else can grab it. It's the best time to board. Now, there is no best time as everyone's circumstances vary. If you fly into your cruise same day, for example, not advisable, but people do it, and you have an early flight that gets you to the port city at 9 a.m., you probably want a morning boarding time so you don't have a lot of time to fill between landing and getting on the cruise ship. If you're driving to the port and you know that you're not going to get there till 1 p.m. at the earliest, you'll want to select an afternoon boarding time. If you fly in the day before your cruise and you're coming from a port city hotel, you might have a little more flexibility as to when you can or when you want to board the ship. Further, individual preferences also come into play. If this is your first cruise or you don't have the chance to vacation or cruise frequently, you probably want to maximize your time on the cruise ship and you may desire to board the ship as soon as possible. I know people that will even put their bathing suits on under their clothes at that earliest boarding time, get on the ship, and then strip off their outerwear to go and hit the Lido deck pool as soon as possible. So if that describes you and you want to maximize your time on the ship, I encourage trying to select one of those earlier time slots, which usually start no sooner than about 10 to 10:30 a.m. depending on the cruise line. Because keep in mind that an entire ship of cruisers must disembark your ship, then the cruise staff must turn around that ship very quickly, clean all those rooms, in order to have it ready to welcome your new group of embarking cruisers getting on just a few hours later. It's remarkable how fast they do that. Now, generally speaking, most cruisers do clamor for those early time slots, so those are the ones that go fast once online check-in opens. So if you want an early spot, you better get in as soon as check-in opens. However, if you're like me and you cruise often, you may prioritize convenience over time on the ship. I know those earlier slots are in hot competition, and I know that morning and early afternoon are super busy times at the terminal. Long line, maybe having to wait. I don't like that. I also know that most cruise line staterooms don't open until 1:30 p.m. I do not want to deal with checking my bags, lugging them around for hours while I wait for my room to open. So I personally aim for that 2 to 2:30 p.m. boarding time. That's my personal sweet spot because I can then avoid most of those crowds at the terminal. Often I walk right through the process, smooth as silk, walk right onto the ship and into my staterooms, carrying on my own bags where I can get unpacked and settled right away. For me, it's a huge benefit and convenience, so I prefer to board at a later time. Boarding later, however, does have a little bit of a downside. Because it's generally at a time after most folks eat lunch, you'll either need to eat before you board versus enjoying a free meal on the ship, or you'll need to delay your lunch and eat once you get on board. Now, unfortunately, this time period is when the buffet and lunch spots are pretty crowded, so you may have some wait time there. While there's no general best time to board a cruise ship, there may be a best time for you and your wants and needs. So consider these factors and just decide what the best time slot is for you. Then the important thing is that you make sure you go in and select your preferred boarding time frame just as soon as your cruise line's online check-in opens to ensure that you snag your preferred boarding time.